We are absolutely delighted to welcome the team from Calgary to the session this morning. We have Heric, who has joined and worked in the engagement field for over 20 years, during which time he's had the privilege of working on diverse portfolio of projects. Most of Deric's career has been spent at the City of Calgary, but the last 4 years as the team leader of Engage Resource Unit. The City of Calgary's Engage Resource Unit has pivoted successfully through the last year to expand their online engagement. Heric is here with several of the team members to explore what they've been up to. Handing over to you, Heric, and the team.
Thank you. I've got three folks here from the City of Calgary team. I've got Martin Kemp, who's a team supervisor with the Engage Resource Unit. I've got Cal McManus, who's also a team supervisor, and Marcie Dupuis, who's a senior Engage planner here at the City of Calgary. Just like to start with something that you call it a welcome to country, we call it a land acknowledgement. Just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that in Calgary here, we're gathered on the traditional territory of the people of Treaty 7 region in southern Alberta. This includes the Blackfoot Confederacy, made up of the Siksika, Piikani, and Kainai First Nations, the Stoney Nakoda First Nations, comprised of the Chiniki, Bearspaw, and Wesley First Nations, and the Tsuut'ina First Nation. Now, the City of Calgary is also homeland to the historic Northwest Métis and to the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 3. We acknowledge all Indigenous urban Calgarians who have made Calgary their home. Well, what I want to talk to you about today is engagement during the pandemic. So what we've done at the City of Calgary, how we pivoted, and how we have moved forward. Essentially, we've been involved with Harvest Digital and the HiVE for quite some time, and we've been trying to really promote the good use of our online tools through the HiVE, with some resistance from clients and stakeholders alike. But we've pivoted during the pandemic. We've had to doing no in-person, obviously, and all online. So we've really been able to expand our offerings. And that's what we're going to talk to you about today. First off, we have about 21 people in our Engage Resource Unit, serving about 30 plus business units in the City of Calgary within the municipal government. We work very collaboratively with our digital team, our marketing team, our communications, and our research team. And the sort of working definition of engagement that we use here at the City of Calgary is purposeful dialogue between the city and stakeholders to gather information to influence decision making. So everything we do feeds up into the political arm to make decisions here in Calgary. Next slide, I think, Kyle. We're probably on 3 now. So since the pandemic started, it wasn't, like I said, it was a priority for us before, but it's become an absolute must for us now. We've expanded it tenfold over the last year so that we can have mirror those in-person sessions online, and using a lot of different technology to do that. We have about anywhere upwards of 150 projects a year. We moved about 156 projects online actively in the past year. We have identified many of the risks associated with online activity, and we've mitigated many of those risks, not all of them, but many of those risks and barriers we've mitigated over the last year, and the things we're happy to talk to you about. And we're using the success of what we've done in the last year to sort of springboard off. When the pandemic is said and done, hopefully that's soon, we are planning on really ramping up the digital development we've done so far, and trying to do as much as we can to be able to express that engagement practice online and not just in person. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kyle, who's going to go a little bit more into depth on what we've done during the pandemic.
Thanks, Heric. Hopefully the slides are not lagging too much here for folks. Here we go. So as Derek said, like all of you guys, we had a huge shift, a shift that we had started with some digital work, but we really were pushed into the deep end to work digitally and work remotely. Before the pandemic, we had this mix of online and in-person activities. And when you talked about engagement, you often thought about open houses, big publications. And open houses in some ways were effective. We talk about we could get maybe 300 people out to an open house. That would be considered really high quality. And when the pandemic hit and we needed to change the way we worked, we actually saw this as an opportunity to refocus on strategy, to be able to say, why are you engaging? We always say, who are you talking to about what, to make what decisions, and how are you going to do it, and why are you choosing those options? And so while there was questions about should we engage and how are we going to engage, we really took that as an opportunity to consult with all of those business units that we support, to be able to help them refine why we were going to do what they wanted to do. And we used the HiVE really as a center point to be able to build out a whole suite of digital options. We were pretty quick in being able to pivot that work. And we also worked really hard to tell the story that we were able to still meet their needs. We had some local research done and used some Canadian research that showed people still did want to engage. An increase in trust generally, and people wanted to be involved in those conversations. And so we really tried to meet that need during that time. What we like to say is that the HiVE and our Engage portal, which is www.engage.calgary.ca, kind of became the home base for our digital engagement. So we use a whole suite of tools, and I've outlined some of the additional tools here, but most of those tools really reflect back to having a project page on the HiVE where we can talk about the work that's going on. One of the key things where we did have to make a shift was in terms of live events. So how do we do meetings like this? I know some folks use Zoom, some folks use WebEx. We use MS Teams by and large. Teams meetings for smaller groups of people, and then Teams live events, so you can have hundreds of people dial into a meeting and have a little bit of Q&A. We often talk about, we used to say 300 people was great for an open house. We might get 300 people coming into a single webcast, and we could get thousands and thousands of people then going to the Engage portal page. And so it's really changed a little bit how we think about how many people we can hear from. We do have a couple of additional tools that we rely on when we do those live events. Mural, which is like a post-it note tool, and Mentimeter. Those are really for live facilitation. So they don't replace tools on the HiVE, but they augment it when we're doing live events. We mentioned that we still have a Question Pro account, and there are a few things that I think the platform on the HiVE is going to be able to do, if not already very shortly, to allow us to be able to concentrate just on the HiVE for surveys. But we did use Question Pro for some standalone things where people can, send out a distributed email or have unique links to a survey, things of that nature. We also really relied on community partners at this time. So our HiVE pages would be focused on a project, but we might actually work with Action Dignity, which is the one up here on the slide, who's a multicultural organization here in Calgary who lets us connect in with some really specific communities. And I think when we get into more detail about some of the things we did, we may even be able to show how we've been able to use language support and translation and alternate character sets based on those relationships. The other one that I'll mention here is a texting tool called Pinpoint, which is very basic. It's very simple. Allows you to get simple text message feedback. But again, that's done in coordination, and it's really focusing back on an engagement campaign, which is based around that portal page. And so while we may use Pinpoint to get a few things here and there, by and large, we do not. Oh, did we lose my screen? One of the things that we also wanted to talk a little bit about is what is our approach to building out those pages? And one of the questions I think that had come out earlier was about a distributed a distributed publishing model. And so I think we have that. We've got about 16 people on our team of 20 who really actively develop and build pages. We're also supported by one web specialist who comes from a web publishing background. They're not an engagement specialist, but they know things like how to do Google Analytics and tie in a few more of the technical elements. Of our 16 kind of regular project authors, we also have around 6 to 8 of them who I would say are power users. Some of them wouldn't even claim to be power users, but we do find the tools pretty intuitive, and that as they spend some time with it, they're really able to do some interesting stuff. And so most of the team that we have will build out their own pages as they're working on developing an engagement strategy, an engagement campaign. And why we like that is that we find that having that familiarity with the input tools, so what are you going to ask? How are you going to ask that? And then what is the type of feedback that you're going to get back is really crucial to coming up with a comprehensive and coordinated engagement campaign. What tool are you stages? What tool are you going to use in later? And then I'll just mention as well that we sometimes even use our Engage portal through private pages as almost a sandbox or an experimental place where we can engage internally with each other. And it's just another awesome tool for us to be able to connect when we are a little bit more separated in space. And I'll pass over to Marcie now, who will talk a little bit more in detail about the specifics around how we're using the tool.
Awesome, thanks, Kyle. So the HiVE has a large host of tools that we use, and I'd like to take a few minutes just to show you some of these that we consider some of our favorites. As was mentioned earlier, we build out our platform to merge strategy with options. So it really is about understanding what our project teams want to know from their stakeholders and who the stakeholders are, and whether these stakeholders have specific needs that we should be considering in our engagement approach. Then we can explore the multitude of tools that the HiVE has to offer that can help us collect input in a meaningful way. So for example, if the stakeholders are targeted, meaning they're not general public for us, they're someone who has some expert level knowledge into the project, the conversation tool is really helpful. This has been great, especially since the pandemic, because it really promotes that interaction between the participants. And because their responses are visible, they can respond to one another, and the threaded comment threads allow the participants to interact similarly to a workshop conversation. So they can, ask a question, respond to each other, that kind of thing. Most often when using this type of tool, it is on a hidden page, which Kyle mentioned and Martin will be expanding on in a little bit. The most common tool we use for seeking feedback from members of the public is forms. So this sets us up for creating surveys using various question types. And now with the Flow tool, people can review their responses before submitting them, which is great. We've had lots of positive feedback on that. So thanks to the HiVE for that one. Social maps. So these are often used on our public pages and are useful because we can define an area on the map and people can scroll into a location to then identify a specific area of concern or tell us something they'd like to see in a particular area. So right now, we're actually talking to folks about public art. And then using the map, we can ask them, what type of art installation they'd like to see, where they'd like to see it, and then they're able to tell us a little bit about why they want to see that particular installation there. We can also upload an image, so similar to the one, I don't think you can see it on the screen right now. So there was a graphic recording, although I can see it looks like Derek's notes. But we can upload an image into the social map so that people can then scroll into that particular graphic versus a map. And maybe there's some visuals on there that people can kind of go in and talk about what visuals actually resonate the most with them. This has been great when it comes to visioning, where, as an example, we did a graphic recording for an environment strategy with young people, but then we went back out in a second phase of engagement to talk to the public around what resonated with them. Visioner is great because it mirrors those Post-it notes, and our team loves Post-it notes. I don't know if all of you love them as much as I do, but if I can get a multitude of shapes, it's great. Visioner mirrors Post-it notes and has been great tool as we've transitioned to being primarily online. Our team would often have people provide comments on Post-its when they were gathered in person before the pandemic, and Visioner's been really useful in allowing us to continue with this format. The question and answer tool is really quite popular amongst our team as well. And Martin is going to be touching on this a little bit as we talk about highlights and learnings. The last two, so the call to action is something we make use of quite often. So this is often included when we're inviting people to sign up for email updates, or if we're encouraging people to contact the city's main number with any questions. We have a 311 number that folks can call into if they have questions. This last one, hotspot, that I've mentioned here, this became our team's way to offer a virtual open house. So this tool provides a graphic representation of an in-person session, so it makes it easier for people to know where to click to get the information they need. Imagine various booths with staff, and by clicking on that booth, you can watch a video explaining what's happening there or see the text that explains that section. The HiVE allows for different formats of documents to be uploaded, and by shifting more online, we want documents to be more accessible, and therefore we can upload these in various formats for participants to download in formats that work for them. With complex projects, we often make use of subpages, so these are often valuable when there are different phases or components of a project, and especially when we have to have pages translated. So this approach really supports our inclusion and diversity, which is something we really strive for at the City of Calgary. All right, Martin, I think we can hand it over to you.
Perfect, thanks, Marcie. I'll talk about highlights and learnings. One learning that I just made was that when you're joining a Zoom conference using a browser on Microsoft Edge, you can't see the presenter screen. So I had to join and rejoin a couple times using Chrome. So thanks for letting me back. It would have been a quiet part of my presentation if Andrew or Cindy hadn't let me in. So thank you for that. So in terms of our highlights and learnings, one of the things that we found we were able to adjust fairly quickly when the pandemic first hit for a number of reasons. One is our internal expertise and collaboration, not only on our team, but within the corporation, within the City of Calgary, working with our project teams and our communicators. We have a centralized team, so we're able to tackle tough problems together. We try things, we fail, we learn, we share quickly with one another and with others in the corporation. And our existing practice and commitment to accessible online engagement using the HiVE has helped with that. We did our best to mirror the feel of in-person engagement through a number of approaches that we found to be quite effective and dynamic. As Marcie mentioned, we used welcome videos on the HiVE. Often these were from project managers or subject matter experts who took the time to create videos to welcome people to participate. We had Q&As that Marcie also talked about. We used the Q&A function to portal pages to allow participants to pose questions directly to team members, which could be answered real time or within a specified amount of time, like for example, 48 hours. And we used hidden, private, and public engage pages. Public pages are the most common. However, we can access them through unsearchable URLs, so we can make them hidden. We use unpublished pages if we're just wanting teams to be able to review it, translators to go in and take a look at things. Hidden pages, we use a lot for things like internal engagement where we're sending a link to 15,000 City of Calgary employees. The risk is low if people do share the link around. And then we use password. We have the option of using password protected pages. We haven't used this as often. We also use private pages, and the only people who can access the site are registered community member users who have been added to that. We in the past year tend to use that if we have working groups that are working over a period of time and sharing information, often for our planning and development, community planning working groups. So as you can see, we've really tried to kind of mirror in person by doing this. Kyle, if we could go to the next slide, I'll just talk quickly about some of the challenges and opportunities. A challenge and opportunity, I think, was around accessibility. We really try to be accessible in our in-person activities, and we take the same approach around how to best remove barriers to engagement for online in order to create equitable access. We did this through increasing our amount of translation, which also lowered the cost to publish materials electronically. We, I guess, reduced physical barriers in a way, allowing people to participate in a place and at a time that really works for them. We did find though, and I think this was mentioned in previous sessions here, that even with in Canada or in Calgary, we have relatively high access to internet and enabled devices, but we know that there's folks who don't have the equipment or aren't comfortable joining real-time sessions. So we partnered with our public library when they are open to make our engagement page available on their public access computers. We loan city devices to folks who are taking part in working groups and longer term activities. And we have a 311 city information system, which people can call and give their feedback that way as well. We find it can also be online, or sometimes difficult online to read and respond to nonverbal and other social cues, but we're trying to figure out ways to do that. Content and tone can be difficult, and as you probably all know, sometimes the content of online conversations has shifted, increased the need for moderation. So we're working with our partners in social media, law, HR, partners like the Calgary Police Service, who have a pretty comprehensive online code of conduct. This has also created verbatim challenges. It's one thing to look at hate speech and words that aren't appropriate, but sometimes, especially when you talk about issues of racism and things like that, we're constantly looking at options to make sure we're transparent, but also looking at reducing potential unintentional harm from folks who are reading reading our verbatim. And finally, working with clients. Clients really want often to do things the way things have always been done. And when the pandemic hit, there was a temptation to cancel engagement because face-to-face is something everyone's used to. But we really tried to help them understand all the other things they can do to build trust with stakeholders. And as Kyle mentioned, this means going back to the strategy. We find with sound engagement objectives and strategy, there's usually a number of different tactical approaches available. And COVID has moved us in a particular direction, but the HiVE has continued to provide the home base for these tools, and we continue to adapt and try new things and innovate as we go. And I think our clients and our stakeholders have been adapting and innovating along with us. So that's all I had to say for my part. And I think that brings us to any questions in the last 2 minutes.
Andrew, are there any questions from the community?
Not at the moment. If anyone's got any questions, please pop them into the chat.
One of the questions that I had, Martin, were what were some of the really standout projects that you ran during COVID?
I can let some of my colleagues answer that as well. To a certain extent, it was business as usual, once we determined how to move engagement online. So, we had a number of projects. Marcie can probably speak to responsible pet ownership, which was a bylaw related project. So it had its timelines it had to continue with. We had a lot of planning projects really all over the map. And I think our 150 some projects that were on the books did have to continue one way or the other. So those were really covering a whole realm of topics. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to
two that I'll mention really quick. One was our mid-cycle adjustment, our budget conversation, which was also paired with a fairly extensive budget reduction kind of innovation exercise. And so this is a major citywide project, and we really used language support. So we had translation of all of our engagement materials into traditional and simplified Chinese characters, Arabic, Punjabi, and then Spanish using the standard character set. And we were able to use subpages to mirror the same thing that we were doing in the main page in all of those translated pages. And I think, in fact, Marcie has a project right now that's got a whole nother set of language translations. It's focused on a Northeast community in our city that has an incredibly diverse population base. And so that was really interesting and exciting because it gave us the ability. We had done some in-person translated stuff in the past, and it wasn't always, it was something we wanted to do, we tried to do, but we might have a half a dozen people show up, and we had hired a translator for the whole time. We had published and printed a whole bunch of materials. Being able to do it digitally was really, really exciting because it allowed us to really easily meet that need of the diverse population with honestly less effort and less cost, which is like, for government win-win. How can you do more with less?
Thanks so much, Kyle. We're so grateful. We're just right on time. I know that you guys might stick around for a couple more minutes. So if there's any questions for the Calgary team, feel free to put them into chat and they'll be watching the chat. And I wanted to say thank you for coming after hours. I know that you guys are into your evening already, but thank you so much for joining us. It was just fabulous to hear from all of you. So thank you so much.